Welcome to the Mystic Fool. I'm Martin Worth, and this is the Mystic Fool.
Hey, I was listening to a YouTube video the other day about, amazing things that George Harrison said. And before we go any further, George Harrison did say some amazing things. And I was listening to this and I thought, these things were amazing. Because when George was doing what he was doing back in the 60s and the 70s, for instance, which is mostly what this YouTube video spoke about, the energy was quite different. Man, they had to go to India to get the kind of teachings that you can get, probably are getting, from listening to this podcast at least, if not from other things that are so widely available. And also, it struck me that the techniques that were discussed are, they're dated, because they were fresh, new waves of information, of techniques, of capabilities coming in these days. Back then, when George Harrison was around, they were talking a lot about, the state of the world. Back then, it was still, we had Australians and Americans and other countries fighting in Vietnam. Wow, like down there on the ground fighting. And I know we've had some fighting in Timor, and we've had some fighting in the Middle East and Syria and places, and Afghanistan. I'm not negating any of the service that our lads gave in those circumstances, but what I am saying is, look at the difference between last century and this century. Here we are, 24 years, one quarter into the 21st century. That's amazing. And what George was talking about was almost one half back in the last century. He wasn't 50s, but 60s, 70s, you know what I'm saying? Pretty much by the last quarter of the last century, of the 20th century, George Harrison was doing other stuff. So 50 years, a half century have elapsed. And in that time, think about the world. Sure, you can get upset about, what's happening in Eastern Europe. You can be upset about all sorts of different things. But, we don't have bombs dropping on your house like they used to have in places like England, Germany, France. Pretty much the consciousness of the collective consciousness of this planet is way more about peace and love and kindness than it was back then. So what's my point? Haha, I knew you were thinking. My point is this: as our collective consciousness has improved, and that's a debatable topic in some ways, but I believe it's improved. It has improved. Just referring back, what about toxic masculinity? There's not as much of that around as there used to be. What about women's rights? Way different now. What about the days when parents used to smack the kids and you used to get the cane at school? Don't happen anymore, does it? There's so many things that have changed. And in those things changing, the collective consciousness of the planet has changed. And because the collective consciousness of the planet has changed, it's way more easy to access spiritual dimensions than it was back in the day when George Harrison and the Beatles had to go to India to sit with a Maharishi to learn transcendental meditation, because transcendental meditation was the biggest deal in the day. And you know what? Not required now. Not at all. If you had to listen to my last podcast last Monday, I think I called it Simply Being. And if you haven't listened to it, please scroll back and have a listen. Because in that meditation, there is a capability for you to access a very deep level of consciousness that even George Harrison and the Beatles probably may not have actually achieved. And I say probably may not because I'm not judging. I'm just saying, back then, the veil was thick. The collective consciousness was heavy like a blanket over the spirituality of mankind. You had to go and sit in an ashram in India or elsewhere or become a nun or a monk to be able to access spirituality. Now you don't have to. Now spirituality, thanks to the thinning of the veil, the lifting of the heaviness of the collective consciousness, we're now able to access so much more incoming information. Maybe that information was always accessible to us, but because of the veil, the blanket veil, not the thin veil, because of the veil, we couldn't feel it. Or maybe, as a lot of people say, the time when the Beatles were doing their spirituality stuff, that was the beginning of the age of Aquarius. And maybe, as some people say, we are moving into that band of cosmic energy which creates the awakening of the human race, or any race whose planet should traverse through that band of photon energy, that band that comes from the Pleiades, which I think we've discussed in one of these podcasts. And I can't remember which one, but I'm sure I have. Yeah, so what's the takeaways from this little conversation? First up, you can listen to YouTube videos about how great things were. And you can miss the fact that these things are available now. You can listen to YouTube videos that tell you how to achieve peace, harmony, and you can believe from those videos or audios that it's hard work. You got to do this, you got to do that, you have to go for years. I did a day's virtual retreat in pranic breathing a few months back, and the guy that delivered that's a great fellow, and I'm not going to mention him because what I've got to say is this: he was so deep into the rules and the rituals of pranic yoga, if that's the right word for it, that he solidly believed you could not achieve a level of spirituality in this lifetime, that it would take many, many thousands of lifetimes to achieve a level of spirituality. And I thought, wow, man, that's a really limiting belief. Yeah. Just as people don't go to church anymore, because I'm telling you, back in the 50s, even people who didn't consider themselves religious still went to church on a Sunday. It was what you did. And that's about the usefulness of religion, isn't it? It's something that you do because you don't know why, but you do it. It's ritual. The same way there are people who are stuck in these beliefs of the Eastern religions. They're no different. They're all the same. And seriously, I'm not knocking anything. I mean, I believe there's gold in Christianity. I believe there's gold in Buddhism. I believe there's gold in Taoism. I believe there's gold in the Ayurvedic yoga traditions. Absolutely. But in the same way that you look at how the church has screwed up the teachings of Jesus, you've got to also understand that the Buddhist monasteries have screwed up the teachings of Buddha. That the Chinese monks, whoever they may be, have complicated the teachings of the Tao. And I guess that's quite prevalent in Confucianism. Confucius certainly confused a few things. Excuse the pun. Ha ha. So what am I saying? Don't get caught up. Please do not get caught up thinking that spirituality is difficult. Please do not get caught up thinking you have to go and do all these things. I mean, yeah. Sadhguru, he's pretty cool. He's pretty liberal. He said something about ritual. And I know I've done a podcast on ritual. Sadhguru, and I may have mentioned it then, Sadhguru says, if your guru gives you an exercise or activity or meditation to do, then do it. But don't do it forever. Don't become bound by it. The purpose of any spiritual practice is to raise your awareness, to raise your consciousness to another level. And in so doing, that meditation, that thing, that what it was that your guru gave you, is only relevant when it was given until you, in using that tool, raise your vibration to the point that you don't need it anymore. I say with the meditations on my Martin Worth YouTube channel, hey, listen to these meditations. Some of them are still relevant, but some of them were only relevant at the time. And if you listen to some of those meditations on my YouTube channel, then you may find that they don't hit the mark for you. It's probably because they were recorded like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, maybe more. And I wish, I should make the time sometimes to go through them and have a listen and say, Spirit, does this have relevance anymore? I have listened to some of them and they do have relevance. There's some pretty cool meditations there that seem a little bit timeless, which is great. But some of them, they were good for a while. Some of them, they're good if that's what you need right now. And you have to realize that they're a tool, much like Sadhguru said. They're a tool. And if you're listening to this and you're one of my clients, one of my mentorship clients, or one of my healing clients, or you're on the path with me, then you'll know that I've referred you to some of these meditations. I've given you spiritual techniques that you can use that were relevant at the time that you and I spoke about those things. Are they relevant now? If they are, continue to use them. If they are not, stop using them. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If it's not relevant anymore for you, what is relevant for you now? What is the next step for you? What is the next thing that can take you deeper, take you closer? Deeper and closer to what? To your authentic self, to your essential nature. Because that is what spirituality is all about. Aligning with our essential self. That part within us that is eternal, immortal, and infinite. If you're thinking, how do I do that? Okay, I'm going to refer you to a tool. I'm going to refer you to listen to the podcast on Simply Being. And I'm going to ask you to listen to it at a time when you are sitting down alone and it's quiet, because it's got a meditation in it. And that meditation will hit the spot for you. I'm going to ask you to leave me a comment on that podcast, and it's got nothing to do with the algorithm. Oh, it'll help the algorithm. But I just want to know, did it work for you? And how did it work for you? And if it didn't work for you, I'd like to know, because I would like to be able to give you something that does work for you so you can move forward. And not just about me. I'm not the only guy out here, you know that. But my mission is to help you. That's why I'm doing this podcast. My mission is to help you to clear your immediate issues. And if you do have immediate issues, things that are plaguing you and bugging you, get in touch with me. Go to martinworth.com, get my phone number, give me a ring. Email themysticfool@martinworth.com. If you have immediate issues that are stalling you, let's fix them. It can be done by distance. It can be done in person. It can be done over the telephone. But I prefer Zoom. Second thing, my mission is to assist you to connect to your essential nature. That part of you that is the silence, the stillness that gives life to reality. Yeah. The third thing, my mission is to help people like you to create the life they love. We don't need to be suffering. We don't need to be in any way, in any pain, suffering, distress whatsoever. If you have any pain, suffering or distress whatsoever, and you're listening right now and saying, yeah, right, it's always like that, that's because you believe it to be so. Get on the phone, email me, let's change it. Seriously. It can be done. So please don't get caught up with old stuff that sounds groovy because it was George Harrison. Sure, he was just a human being, There's some pretty good songs, him and the Beatles. Yeah, timeless stuff. Wisdom in some of those words. Yeah. Is what George had to say relevant for today? Maybe if you're just beginning out, yeah. But don't get caught up in it. Take what is valid for you. Use it. Move on. Expand your consciousness. Grow closer to your authentic nature. And create the life you love. Listen to Simply Being if you haven't already listened to it. Podcast 43, I think. Yeah, you know what also? If you have listened to it, listen to it again from this viewpoint. And allow yourself to connect to your essential nature. Love you. Be well. See ya. So, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like it. Please subscribe to my channel. Please put comments below because that helps in the whole algorithm thingy-bobby. Send me an email to themysticfool@martinworth.com with your thoughts and feelings. Anything you think that you would like me to talk about in these podcasts, let me know. I will respond, and I will talk about topics that you asked me to talk about. So thank you. Love you. Hope the best for you. And I'll catch you. See ya.